So, my family has a ton of money, like, we're really rich, but oh boy, they can get on my nerves big time. It's weird because I just don't vibe with them the same way. Me and my brothers and sisters, we've never had to work like most people do. Anything we wanted or needed, bam, it was handed to us on a silver platter. Now, because we've always had everything given to us, my siblings kind of act like they're the center of the universe. They think they're so important, and sometimes they're not very nice to others. They can be outright mean, acting like other people are invisible or just not worth their time. I'm really not into that whole attitude, but to be honest, it's not totally their fault. This is the way we were all brought up. From when we were little, the adults around us made it seem like the people who worked in our house, like the cleaners, cooks, and gardeners, were way below us. They were there just to do whatever we wanted. And that's how we were taught to treat them. Which is not cool, but it's what we learned growing up. My parents are like two peas in a pod, both of them acting pretty much the same way. My dad is the type who thinks the world revolves around him. He doesn't really think about what others need or want, just what he does. When it was time for me to think about college, my folks had this big plan for me to study business. They were all about me taking over the family business one day. But guess what? That was the last thing I wanted to do. And studying business? No way. That just wasn't my jam. What I was really into was psychology. I wanted to dive deep into understanding how people think and why they do the things they do. And I was determined to follow that path no matter what. My mom did try to change my mind. She gave it her all, trying to convince me to follow the family plan. But I was like, nope, not happening. My decision was rock solid. There was no way I could see myself walking down the same path that turned them into who they are. Back then, I really thought it was all about the money and the business that made my parents act the way they did. But I've come to realize that's not exactly true. Just because you're rich or involved in a big business doesn't mean you have to forget how to be a decent person. They could have chosen to stay grounded and treat others with respect. One night, things really came to a head with my dad over my choice to go for psychology instead of business. He laid it out pretty clear. If I was going to chase after my own dreams, then he wasn't going to support me in that. He basically told me to pack my bags and leave because I wasn't willing to put the family's wants before my own. Hearing that from him hurt, a lot. But I can't say it was a total surprise. My dad has always been the type to want total control, and he doesn't take it well when someone challenges him. If you try to stand up to him, he's going to push back hard. Without giving it too much thought back then, my dad might end up regretting his decision. But knowing him and his big pride, he wouldn't admit it. No way. Once he says something, that's it. He told me to leave, and even though my mom tried to step in and stop what was happening, his mind was already set. So I left. And let me tell you, going from having everything just to snap away to suddenly having nothing was a huge shock. But luckily, I had my head on straight and managed to snag a Fulbright scholarship. That was a game changer. It meant I only had to figure out how to manage my day-to-day expenses. Deep down, I kind of hoped my dad was just bluffing, maybe trying to scare me into changing my mind. But then 1 month went by, then another, then 6 months, and now? It's been 12 whole years since that day I walked out. Making it on my own wasn't exactly a walk in the park. I had to cut back on pretty much everything I was used to, which was a huge adjustment. But I managed to pull it off without leaning on my family for support, which was important to me. The hardest part, though, was realizing my mom didn't make any effort to reach out after I left. I always thought she was different, that she'd be on my side, so that stung more than I'd like to admit. Even though things were tense with my parents, I kept in touch with my siblings. We'd catch up now and then, grabbing a coffee or a quick meal whenever we could. They often tried to slip me some cash, trying to help out in their own way, but I never took it. The whole point of me striking out on my own was to do just that, make it on my own. Plus, as the eldest, it just felt wrong. If anything, I felt like I should be the one helping them out, not the other way around. After finishing my bachelor's in psychology, I found myself stepping into the world of advertising. It was an unexpected turn, but one that I absolutely loved. The thing is, my background in psychology gave me a unique edge. While my colleagues focused on the marketing side of things, I could dive deeper, understanding the why behind people's decisions and behaviors. That knowledge made all the difference, helping me to stand out and really make my mark in the agency. Starting my own agency was a big leap, but over the past 4 years, it's really paid off. I've been working hard, helping various businesses shape their marketing and branding, really putting my psychology background to good use. Things were going smoothly until last week when I got a text from one of my sisters. It was about my dad. He's gotten sick. Nothing life-threatening, but it shook things up. He wanted to see me of all things. After everything. After 12 years of silence, no check-ins, no attempts to mend fences, he wanted me to just show up? I couldn't wrap my head around it. I said no. In my mind, he had made his choice all those years ago. My siblings, they're my family. My parents, though? Parents don't just walk away from their kids. But then, my other sister called, trying to get me to change my mind. Persistent, just like when we were kids. I told them I'd swing by, hoping that would get them to give me some peace. I wasn't really planning on going. Yet, as the weekend approached, curiosity got the better of me. What did he want after all this time? And despite everything, part of me longed for a chance to mend the broken pieces. I didn't like the idea of us being estranged, a family split at the seams. So here I am, hoping for the best but preparing for anything. This weekend could change a lot, or it might change nothing at all. But I'm going into it with an open mind. Who knows? Maybe it's the first step toward healing some old wounds. Update 1. Walking into the family home after such a long hiatus was surreal. The place had undergone a transformation. Every corner and crevice seemed to reflect a more modern, sophisticated vibe. It was clear my mom had been at it again, infusing the space with new life, something she's always had a knack for. Despite the changes, a part of me was eager to see the garden. That space held the purest of my childhood memories, a sanctuary of simpler times. The atmosphere was charged with awkwardness as I faced my family again. My mom, especially, seemed unable to meet my gaze, which wasn't surprising given everything that had transpired. It was during this tense reunion that my sister dropped a bombshell. My father hadn't actually asked to see me. He wasn't even aware of my planned visit. However, the news of his illness wasn't fabricated. Though not critical, it was genuine. This entire scenario, it turned out, was a carefully orchestrated plan by my sisters and mom. A desperate attempt at bridging the chasm that had grown between us over the years. They confessed that both my parents were regretful about the past, about the way things had been left between us. Yet pride or uncertainty had kept them from taking the first step towards reconciliation. My siblings hoped that by bringing me back under these pretenses, it might pave the way for some much-needed healing and forgiveness. Despite the initial shock and the layers of complex emotions, this revelation shed light on the fact that my family, in their own flawed way, was reaching out, seeking to mend the fractures that had kept us apart for so long. Finding out my family had gone to such lengths to bring me back home, I couldn't hold on to any resentment. Deep down, I realized how much I missed them. Despite the drama and disagreements, there were moments when I longed for the connection, to share the highs and lows of my life with them. My father's reaction upon seeing me was one of utter surprise. His first words, questioning whether I had finally decided to take over the family business, hit me like a wave of the past crashing back. My firm no led him to bluntly suggest I had no reason to be there, that I should leave if my stance hadn't changed. But this time, things took a different turn. My mom and sisters, in an unprecedented display of solidarity, insisted I wasn't going anywhere. My mom, especially, took a stand I had never seen from her before. She openly expressed her regret over my father's decision to kick me out all those years ago and made it clear she wouldn't allow it to happen again. Her words and actions in that moment, standing up to my dad on my behalf, shifted something inside me. It was a gesture of love and support that I hadn't expected, and it softened my heart towards her. My dad remained unmoved, still clinging to his old viewpoints, but my mom's resolve was unshakable. She insisted I stay through the weekend, a decision that, despite my dad's opposition, was non-negotiable for her. This unexpected advocacy from my mom signaled a potential thaw in our frosty relations, hinting at the possibility of healing and understanding within our family dynamic, even if my dad and I were still at an impasse. Settling back into my old room was like stepping into a time capsule. My sister explained that it had become something of a no-go zone, a place preserved as I had left it, only entered for occasional cleaning. Surrounded by the remnants of my past, I was overwhelmed with nostalgia and a deep yearning for reconciliation with my family. The desire for us to be together, without the shadows of past conflicts darkening our relationship, grew stronger. Yet I was also prepared for the possibility that not everything might go smoothly, especially with my dad. If he remained unbending, I faced the prospect of returning to my life as the son who lived apart from his family, a role I hoped I wouldn't have to resume. The following day, a summons from my sister led me to a family gathering in the sitting room, an assembly that included my dad. The atmosphere was thick with tension, a prelude to what felt like a significant announcement. My dad broke the silence with a statement that was as shocking as it was hurtful. He revisited the past, declaring that he had once disowned me, a decision now up for reconsideration on the condition that I humble myself by kneeling and begging for his forgiveness, coupled with the stipulation that I join the family business. This proposition, seemingly simple to others in the room, struck me as a betrayal of my own principles and the life I had built independently. The expectation from my family for me to comply was evident, yet they failed to grasp the weight of such a demand on me. Kneeling and begging for acceptance on terms that contradicted my identity and aspirations was not a testament to familial bond, but a surrender of self-respect and autonomy. My journey had taught me the value of standing firm in my convictions, and this ultimatum from my father challenged the very essence of that lesson. It was a moment of profound clarity, a crossroads between seeking approval through submission and embracing the freedom of my own path, however lonely that might be. So, after all the drama and tough times my dad put me through for the last 12 years, here we are. When I first had to strike out on my own, it was super tough. I had to figure out everything by myself, from where I was going to live to how I was going to make money. But guess what? I worked super hard and now own a super successful company. I really don't need anything from him. When he asked me to come back and basically beg for his forgiveness, then help save his business, I was like, no way. I told him straight up that he needs me way more than I need him at this point. The family business he's so desperate for me to take over? Yeah, it's basically crashing and burning. It's about to go bankrupt because it's been managed really badly and they haven't kept up with all the changes in the world and what people want. But here's the thing. I studied psychology, right? So I understand what makes people tick, what makes them want to buy things, which is exactly what the company needs right now. But instead of jumping to save the day, I told him I needed an apology first and foremost. And even then, I wasn't interested in getting involved with his business mess. I also pointed out that he's not the boss of the universe. He can't expect everything to always go his way, especially not after everything that's happened. And there's more. My older sister, she's got some serious business skills. She could totally take over and do an amazing job, but he's stuck on this old-fashioned idea that only his son should run the show. It's time for him to get over that and see the talent he's ignoring right in front of him. When I dropped the bombshell that I was never going to take over my dad's businesses and suggested that my sisters were more than capable of doing it, the room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. It was like everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. My dad didn't say a word, so I just turned around and walked out. Before I did, though, I made it clear I was leaving first thing in the morning. I felt like an outsider in my own home, unwanted. What I didn't realize was that my comment about the business being on the brink of bankruptcy was news to my mom and sisters. They had no idea things were that bad. My dad had been keeping it all under wraps, not letting anyone know how dire the situation really was. He'd been borrowing more and more money just to keep up the appearance of our family's wealthy lifestyle, all because he couldn't stand the thought of anyone thinking we were poor. This revelation hit everyone like a ton of bricks. My dad had been so caught up in his pride and the image he wanted to maintain that he hadn't even considered getting help or being honest with his own family about the financial troubles. It was a mess, one that he was determined to hide at all costs, even if it meant risking everything he'd worked so hard to build. After I left the room, my mom really let my dad have it. She told him straight up that his huge ego was tearing our family apart. She made it clear that they both owed me an apology, pointing out that it wasn't too much to ask for, considering everything that had happened. She went on to say how proud she was of me for building my own advertising agency from the ground up, turning it into one of the best in the city. It wasn't about me taking over the family business for her. She just missed having her son around. Later, she came to my room, a place filled with memories and now, significant conversations. She apologized for not being there for me when I needed her the most, for not standing up to my dad. She admitted that was her biggest regret, acknowledging she should have been stronger. It was a lot to take in, hearing my mom open up like that. Her apology felt sincere, a moment of vulnerability that showed me just how complex and strained things had become because of the choices they made. It was a step, maybe not a fix for everything, but a start toward understanding and possibly healing some of the wounds that had been left to fester for too long. Over time, the distance and silence between us seemed to cement the idea that it might be too late to mend what had been broken. I was all packed up and ready to head out the next morning, convinced that my brief return had changed little in the grand scheme of things. Then, there was a knock at my door. To my surprise, it was my dad. Seeing him there, vulnerable, was something I never expected. And when he broke down, it caught me completely off guard. It was the first time I'd ever seen him let his guard down, to show such raw emotion. As tears started to blur my own vision, he apologized, admitting he hadn't been the father I needed. He confessed that he had wanted to reach out, to somehow bridge the gap between us, but fear and pride held him back. He believed the rift was too deep, the damage irreparable, so he chose to maintain the status quo, however painful it was. Hearing him acknowledge his faults, expressing pride in my achievements despite his absence from my journey, was more healing than I could have imagined. In that moment, I forgave him. It wasn't just about letting go of the bitterness or the hurt, it was about accepting our flawed human nature and the fact that sometimes we get things horribly wrong, but it's never too late to try and make amends. Forgiving him opened the door to a new chapter for us, one where the past didn't have to dictate our future. It was a step towards rebuilding, not just for the sake of what was lost, but for the possibility of what might still be salvaged and grown from here on out. Now for the top comments before the update too, not the whole. This made me emotional because my parents don't want to support my dream either. So I can relate with how you must have felt. I moved out of the house a week ago, and I'm currently trying to find my bearings. I'm so happy that you guys got back together and you were able to forgive them, not be home. But father is. What is it with fathers and their ego? His son turned out perfect, but he missed all of it. He would probably still regret all he did to you for the rest of his life. Update 2. So, the morning after the big emotional showdown with my dad, I was all set to leave. Bags packed, heart a bit lighter, but still unsure about where all of this was heading. The sun hadn't even properly woken up yet, and there I was, standing at the front door, taking one last look at the house that held so many memories. Just as I'm about to step out, my little brother, the one who's always been more into his gadgets than family drama, stops me. He's holding this clunky old photo album, the kind we used to flip through before everything became digital. "You can't leave without seeing this," he says, with a seriousness I'm not used to from him. We sit down on the steps, and he flips it open. It's full of pictures I've never seen before. Candid shots of the family, me in my most rebellious teenage phases, moments of genuine happiness that somehow got buried under years of arguments and misunderstandings. My brother, usually so reserved, starts sharing stories about each photo, reminiscing about the good old days, as he calls them. It's weird, but sitting there with the morning chill just starting to bite, I felt this wave of nostalgia mixed with hope. Maybe, just maybe, we weren't all as far apart as I'd thought. My brother's gesture, sharing that album, was his way of saying he missed having his big sibling around, missed the unity we once had as a family. As we're laughing over a particularly embarrassing photo of me trying to skateboard and failing spectacularly, my mom comes out. She's surprised to see us there, huddled together, but smiles in a way I hadn't seen in years. She sits beside us, pointing out photos, adding her own memories. It's a small moment, but powerful. No grand gestures, just us, finding our way back to each other one photo at a time. Then, as if on cue, my dad appears at the doorway. He's awkward, clearly unsure of how to join this unexpected family moment. But my brother just scoots over, making room for him without a word. And for the first time in a long time, we're all together, not saying much, but saying enough. Before I know it, the sun's fully up and it's time for me to go. But leaving this time feels different. There's a promise of something new, a sense of healing that's just beginning. As I drive away, my phone buzzes. It's a text from my dad, a simple drive safe. Maybe it doesn't sound like much, but coming from him, it's monumental. The rest of the day, I'm on autopilot, going through the motions, but my mind's stuck on that morning. It's funny how life works. You think some doors are closed forever, but then, out of the blue, they crack open just enough to let the light back in. Back in my apartment, I find myself missing the family chaos, the laughter, and even the arguments. It's a mess, but it's our mess. And maybe, just maybe, it's not too late to clean it up together. So what's next? Honestly, I don't know, but for the first time in a long time, I'm okay with that uncertainty. Because now there's a flicker of hope that wasn't there before. A hope that maybe we can rebuild what was lost. Not as it was, but into something new, something better. Next story. So, I'm a 28-year-old girl, and I've got this apartment with 3 bedrooms. It's pretty cool. Now, I have this friend, right? She's a year younger than me, 27, and she was in a bit of a pickle because she didn't have a place to crash. So, being the good friend that I am, I told her, "Hey, you can totally stay in one of my rooms for a while until you find your own spot." It wasn't like we wrote anything down on paper. It was all pretty chill because we're friends. She's been living with me for about 7 months now. Overall, she's been a pretty okay roommate. She doesn't munch on my snacks, and she gives me rent money without me having to chase her for it. But there's this one thing that bugs me. Sometimes she forgets to tell me her boyfriend's going to stay over. It's not the biggest deal, and she always says sorry, and promises to give me a heads up next time. And she does. Well, sometimes at least. But here's where it gets a bit weird. 2 days ago, I came home and bam, there's her boyfriend, just chilling and watching TV in my living room. I was kind of taken aback because my friend wasn't even home yet. I was like, is she around? And he's like, nope, just waiting for her to get off work. And I'm thinking, that's a bit odd, isn't it? At this point, I was more than a little on edge by the fact he was somehow here without her, and asked him how he got it in. He showed me the key that she had given him one so he could come around to hang out. I won't lie, I was shocked at this and rather upset. I demanded he give me the key back and get out of my home. You seem surprised and ready to protest as she'd given him the key, but I told him that this is my home, and she had no right to do that and to get out now. He handed over the key, clearly thinking I was overreacting, but left when my roommate came back. I confronted her, asking why she thought she had any right to give a key out and to especially do so without asking me. She told me I was being unreasonable, and it was her home too. So she should be able to give out keys if she wants it to. This led to an argument, and I finally told her that this wasn't her home. She was only renting a room, and she was to get out within 2 weeks because I don't trust her now. The last 2 days, she's been trying to tell me I've been overreacting and I'm being unfair. She has apologized, though admittedly, she doesn't see what the big deal is and is begging me not to kick her out. Am I the a-hole? Edit. As some people think 2 weeks isn't much time to find a new place. Don't worry, she won't end up on the streets. She can find a new place or go back to her parents' home, which is where she was staying until I let her move in. If she didn't have them to go to, she'd have more time. Now for the top comments before the update. Not the whole, massively. This is your home. You agreed to let her stay, but she abused your trust by giving out a key to someone else without your permission. I'm sure if she asked you first, you'd have said no. This is unforgivable, in my opinion. And she doesn't even seem that sorry, because she still doesn't think it was wrong of her to do. Not me. It's your home. It sounds like you're panicked in the moment, which is perfectly understandable. So I can see how you mistake this for an overreaction. But rest assured, this is perfectly understandable. 2 weeks is a bit short, if I'm honest. But, oh well, at some point she was going to move out, right? This was always meant to be temporary. Next story. So I, 30 male, got him into a really messy situation and I need this place to give me a verdict. So I was in a 6-year relationship with a single mom named Tara. 3F when we met, she had an 8-year-old daughter named Sasha. We took things very slow with the whole situation. Eventually she introduced me to her daughter, and things went really well. After 4 years of dating, we finally got engaged with her daughter's blessing. But we had an obstacle stopping me from tying the knot. I wanted my own biological kids. It was important to me, and something I've always wanted. Tara was open to this, and we had plans of having our own kids. Well, 5 years into the relationship, she was still on birth control measures. I kept saying that she knew I wanted kids, and what was the deal? She kept pushing off the conversation. Eventually it came out that she didn't want to have more kids. At first she thought she did, but she changed her mind. I told her that was unfortunate and decided to break up the engagement. Tara was hurt and wouldn't even let me explain things to Sasha. I was basically gone the next day. I moved a couple of blocks away to a new house. Sasha somehow found out where I moved to and started showing up, like just knocking on my door. The first couple of times I opened the door and talked to her, explaining the situation and telling her she had stopped by without her mom knowing, and it was inappropriate. She did it again, and this time was demanding to know why I didn't talk to her like I used to. So I drove her back to her mom's, and we had a sit-down conversation with the three of us. We explained the situation and told her she needed to let it go. So I started dating someone a few days after the breakup. Things have been going really well. But when she parked in my driveway this past weekend, her car was damaged. She had a soda thrown on the windshield and scratch marks on her driver's side door. I took my security footage and I could see someone on a bike ride up to her car and do the damage. But it was late at night and the person had a mask and hood on. In my head, it was Sasha, but I had no evidence. So this Sunday morning, there is a knock on my door and it's Sasha again. It's like Edom. I was fed up. I called Tara but noticed that it was locked. I tried social media and it was blocked there too, so I called the cops. The cops showed up and talked to Sasha and me. I explained the whole situation and they called Tara. Tara showed up looking out of sorts and Sasha was crying. I said I wouldn't press charges this time for the next time she's at my house. I will. Tara needs to be more aware of where her daughter is and to maybe get therapy. I'm sick of dealing with this and that. Maybe if she didn't block me, I wouldn't have had to call the cops. Tara screamed at me and called me a ton of names. Am I a whore? Now for the top comments. Not the hole as Tara left you. No other choice because she blocked you. It's completely understandable for a Sasha as a 13-year-old who had you in her life for nearly half of it, that it's difficult to see you suddenly gone. That being said, Tanya's to do a better job of recognizing that no longer having you around has had a negative impact on her daughter, causing her to now frequent your house uninvited to try and have further contact with you, even though you no longer have anything to do with her or Tara.